Today is February 21st, 2023. Welcome you and thank you for joining us today. I'm Phil Santology, Program Chair for ASQ Section 1510, Southeast Florida. And as always, if you'd like to know more about ASQ Section 1510, you can check our site on the Communities tab of the myasq.org website. And you can also join our LinkedIn group. This event is being recorded live, and we will post the recording and the slides to make them available to everybody afterwards. You will receive an email verifying your recertification units for tonight, but you can refer to the myasq.org website at our tab, the Southeast Florida Section 1510 Community tab, and there's a files link there that you can access in the eligibility list for this and for previous meetings as well. I would like at this point to introduce Kara Bryant, who's our section chair, and who may have a few words of welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I encourage you all to register. So we're going to have a tour at City Furniture on March 2nd. It's going to be hosted by our ASQ student branch. I highly encourage you to join. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. To tonight's presentation. Our speaker tonight is Dr. David H. Hines, president of Hines & Associates. David is a business coach and author of the book entitled The Essence of Lean, Superior System of Management. During his professional career, he was the owner of a building supply distributor and held management positions in consulting, biotech, and transportation. After earning his PhD, David joined the faculty of the Huizenga Business School, where he developed and taught courses in entrepreneurship, service operations management, data-driven decision-making, and information systems. Tonight, David will tell us why do managers resist quality improvement. Please join me in welcoming David.
Thank you so much, Phil. I appreciate it. I'm actually going to ask you why you think managers resist. I may give my own impression a little bit. Thank you, Kara. Thank you, Dr. Kramer, longtime associate of mine. Thank you very much. Thanks for all of being here. Yeah, before I get started, I wanted to just get a sense for who you are, what you do. I did this. I did a little survey last time I did this at one of the sections, ASQ sections up in Minnesota, I believe it was. So I'm just curious if you are a lean consultant or educator, or just quality consultant or educator, not a practitioner. Raise your hand. Who is like there, right? Okay, two. So most everybody's practitioners here. Okay. Are there? Now, I don't know if we can get any feedback online on this. If not, don't worry.
And if you have input, you can either speak up or if you want to type it into the chat, we'll take care of it that way.
Anybody who's not a practitioner.
Anybody who's not a practitioner.
Consultant, educator, whatever else you want. When I did this in the last section, we had about 30, 40 responses. It was interesting. Of consultants, about a third of the ASQ members were manufacturing. The other 60% were service, which I thought was kind of interesting. And we split it between the larger service organizations and smaller, and that was split about equal. Okay, so lean practitioners, we got a bunch of, I assume the rest of you are in business. So how many of you are in manufacturing? All right, one, two. So who's in a service organization with more than 500 employees? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And service organization less than 500. Okay. All right. Interesting.
Yeah, we've got a couple. Looks like 3 A's and a B online.
3 A's and a B. Okay. All right. So mostly large. It's interesting. I would have thought there would have been more smaller ones in this market, but okay. All right. If you go click forward, you'll see what the section up there. So about half in that section were manufacturing, and again split the remainder half or so. Okay, I appreciate it. Just want to get an idea of who I'm talking to here. So what I want to do, talk a little bit, I guess we've got about an hour, talk a little bit about lean as a management system, and just what I've been doing for the last 13 years or so is that, I mean, among other things, but teaching lean, not really as a quality improvement program, but as a management system, because, I was actually a associate of Dr. Kramer at Nova. I was in the entrepreneurship. Well, I was actually in decision science, but when I taught lean, I was really teaching to entrepreneurship students who were trying to learn. It was about management. I was teaching management. I wasn't teaching quality. But I had spent 10 years building a company based on TQM, right? Good old quality management. Also, I followed the whole idea of transformational leadership. This was Warren Bennis back then, and I know it's been more like that. So, and after I ended up selling the company and getting in academia, I really wanted to teach entrepreneurship, but I to have some real material, like based on my experience, Lean was a perfect fit. And Lean, by the way, and City Furniture, I know, I guess you're heading out to City Furniture, right? Because they built Lean and made it their way of managing. So that's what I'm gonna talk. I'll talk a little bit about how I do that and maybe some little different ways that if it can help you in ways that you might be able to use, feel free to use it. Everything you're gonna see tonight, everything I do at this point is all public domain. So I do it not to make money. I'm doing it. You know, I'm actually enjoying my 7 grandkids, but I'm very passionate about Lean and as a management system. And so that's why I do what I do. So if there's anything here that you can use, please use it. And you know, all I would ask is give me some feedback, how it's going and what can I do to improve it. So I'll show you kind of how I do it. It's basically a training program for Lean management. So I'll spend maybe 15, 20 minutes on that. And then I do want to address these questions and all of this, please, very interactive. If you want to interrupt me in the middle and have, you know, questions, do it. I would love to do that. But then we'll get into actually a discussion about why some managers seem to accept quality and some don't. I'm curious to see how often you run into one or the other. And what can we do about that problem? All right, any questions or comments before I get started? The Lean training that I've been developing over these last 13 years, and like I say, it was really based originally in my own business in the 90s, and which helped me to really have an incredibly successful business. So, I mean, I attribute a lot of the success that we had to this idea of Lean management, and back then TQM and transformation leadership. So the way I teach Lean is as a management system rather than a quality improvement program. Target audience are really, these were the students at Nova, were either entrepreneurs, small business owners, or they were corporate frontline managers. So we had the whole range from mom and pop shop to, you know, we had Citibank, some people in the back office at Citibank did Lean projects. We had at Starbucks, but at the store level. So this is all kind of frontline. This is not the upper management kind of stuff. This is sort of like the blocking and tackling of management. This is how I look at it. So that's the target audience is basically the managers and the frontline workers who are doing the work. It assumes there's no knowledge of manufacturing. Now, I realize, well, you know, many of the ASQ members are manufacturing, but what I found in trying to teach it especially in the Lean entrepreneurship class, very few students really had knowledge of manufacturing or interest. I mean, South Florida, at least in the smaller businesses, it's very much of a service area as far as whether it's hospitality or retail, wholesale, whatever. And I found that to be a barrier. So I really tried to make it more of a general management approach as opposed to manufacturing. You know, and it's amazing how much of that manufacturing is still in there. You look at the books and the training, and it's hard to extract that. And I've worked hard to try to do that. So what we'll show you certainly applies to manufacturing, but it's not going to have any of the specifics. Like you're not going to hear about Kanban and just-in-time manufacturing. There's a lot of concepts that what I've tried to do is just get the absolute essence, you know, the essential pieces of Lean that any manager would need to know and would help them to be a better manager. Now, this is based on the, you know, those of you that know Lean. Well, how many feel familiar with Lean? Everybody feel good about that? Okay. So as I'm sure you know, there's kind of 2 different versions of Lean, at least the way I view it. You know, you have the Lean Six Sigma version where you make great use of the Lean tools, okay, and Lean flow and so forth. But the whole idea of respect for people is not not present. It's not central. And there's all variations of it. I mean, it's not like one or the other, but the way I view lean is, and lean management is, and encouraging the managers and the entrepreneurs to engage all the employees. So what I do is meant to get everybody to understand. It's sort of like creating a baseline of lean knowledge in an organization that you can build on. But in order to do that, I've tried to take most essential lean techniques and really simplify them and make them work so they can be trained to basically rank and file workers. So it's not a matter of experts coming in. You're trying to get this base level of knowledge that you can build on. Okay. So you'll see there's 4 independent training modules. So you don't have to go through all 4 in sequence. You can jump into any one if there's a need. So it's kind of based on prioritized needs of the organization. Trying to teach managers, I teach it like it is the lean way of managing. There's a lean way to manage. Okay. And so these are the basic management practices. Like every manager has to motivate employees, right? Every manager has to organize their workplace, manage the everyday work, and solve problems. So kind of the traditional view of it would be, performance reviews, compensation plans, industrial engineers, procedures manuals, even. And I put Six Sigma projects in here as kind of the traditional, and you'll see I'll kind of compare Six Sigma and Lean a little bit later, but this is sort of the traditional way of managing. And the lean way of managing, these are the 6 techniques that you don't throw out the tradition, but you add to it. So you can manage in a lean way in the right situation. For example, using Gemba walks as a way of motivating employees. Using 5S organizing and visual controls as a way of organizing workplace. So rather than saying, here's a technique, it's like, well, let's see, do you want an organized workplace? How's your workplace looking these days? So here's how you can use these techniques. So these are the 6 what I consider essential lean techniques. And I mean, in my view of lean, these are necessary and sufficient. This is it. If you're not doing all 6, I think you're missing something in your lean organization. But you don't have to go beyond the 6 either. So, and it's kind of based on people management, Gemba walk, standard meetings, process management, standard work, and waste elimination, and then facility, which is 5S organizing and visual controls. So I'll get into these a little bit specifically. I don't want to spend a ton of time because I really want to, get with you, talk more about this idea of why managers resist, because I feel I've seen a lot of that and maybe you'd have an interesting discussion. So let me go through a few of these just to show a couple of different things, the way I teach it in order to be more suitable to managers, frontline managers, and employees, basically to learn. So standard work. Rather than, I started the standard work as kind of a checklist idea, like how do you do standard work? All right, and we talk about why standard work as not just a way of documenting the way you do it, but that you want it clear and understandable to all employees so that it's also a means of communication and building teamwork. So you don't want to just know your own work, you want to be able to see clearly what everybody else does. Okay, so it keeps it, so you don't want to get too detailed. And the other thing I decided to do after for years teaching value stream mapping is I ejected it. I said, that's not essential. So this idea of value stream mapping, why do you do it? You do it to try to understand a process, right? So what I found is I kind of borrowed the idea of the job breakdown sheet. Are you familiar with that, of TWI, training within industry? And asked the trainees to take a process and break it into no more than 15 steps, and ideally less than 15. Who are the actors? It's kind of the swim lane idea. And then, the good old key points from TWI, make or break a process, make the work easier, injure the worker. So go to the next slide, you'll see how this works. So for example, here's a support ticket handling process in a managed service provider. These are the companies that basically run your IT operation if you're a smaller business. So a lot of it is handling support tickets. So, one of the client has a problem with their PC, call it in, has to get addressed, right? So that's the idea. So, and this is actually in my book. These are real situations where this was used. And in 6 steps, we were able to describe the process from initial customer contact, open the ticket, decide to escalate or not. So there were basic level text, and then there was a more sophisticated. So if you had a problem with your computer that needed more than just basic, reboot it or something, it would have to get escalated to another person. Assign the work, fix the issue, document the ticket. The neat thing was it gave them a chance to think through this and to come up with make or break. So for example, a make or break for the initial opening ticket was this idea of acknowledging within 10 minutes. So you're the client, you got a PC problem, and you send an email to your provider saying, hey, I got a problem. Well, did they get it? So they actually, part of what that came out of this exercise was they realized their clients did want to be acknowledged, and they wanted to be acknowledged quickly. So 10 minutes became the make or break. Like if you didn't get back to them in 10 minutes, it means you kind of broke the process. You didn't do it in the right. Use the template to make the process easier. Follow the rules. Now here, to make this work, obviously there's a lot of complexity in processing, so you have to kind of take the simplest version and sort of black box the rest is the way I would present it. So for these more complex tickets, you have this decide to escalate. If yes, then other steps apply. But don't worry about that for now. Let's just get something done. The basic idea of lean. So anyway, so what I found is this gives them a darn good idea of what the process is, what's important, who does it. You don't have to do a map. You can. The next step can be to do the map. But again, I'm trying to build in this baseline of lean knowledge. Okay. So from this, then go to the next one, please. Then you get your standard work guide. It comes right out of it. So here's your standard work. Instead of being just a plain checklist, you've taken all of the stuff in the make or break. Use the template. You can that kind of pops out here. So again, trying to make it really easy. All right, waste elimination. Curious to see what you think. What I found is the 7. First, we have 7. We have the Tim Wood sometimes, right, for the 7 wastes. Sometimes an 8th waste, right? But what I found is you can boil it down to really 4 wastes. I know it may seem like heresy, but when you're trying to teach it to managers and try to make it simple that you can kind of relate to it, the way I teach it, the good old defects are defects, problems with the process, with the service, with the product. Waiting is waiting, but then transport, motion, and overprocessing, they're all basically effort, aren't they? It's more effort than you need. And sometimes we get in arguments about, well, is it transport, is it motion? It doesn't really matter which category, as long as you've identified it as, excess. And then materials, excess materials is overproduction and inventory. So, and I've had some discussions with, people about, does this really cover everything? I've always found it has. I don't know, is there any waste that you feel is not covered by one of these 4?
I would say only the 8th one that you don't have listed there that others usually consider is the mind waste.
Mind, right. Now, yeah. And see, to me, that one is fundamental to the respect for people, the full engagement. So what I do is I use these to really train frontline employees to recognize waste. And it didn't really fit into that kind of way of looking.
But looking at it that way, it's sort of implicit that you're engaging the mind of the employee.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. This whole program is based on engagement, maximizing engagement. So it's assumed. So if you go to the next page, what happens when you simplify it into 4, Then you can do things like, what are the common waste signals? Just simple, dumb stuff, but how do you recognize waste? So defects, errors, mistakes, problems with the product or service. Rework, and of course, we often recognize rework as a, as an indicator of defects. Reworking an activity because of a problem. Or a customer who did not get what they were promised. So I often give the idea of the steak that's overcooked, right? So if the customer complains, what happens? Okay, we had a defect, gets reworked, right? It has to go back to the kitchen, you go through the whole working. But what if the customer doesn't complain? Is that still a defect? It's like if the tree falls in the woods, you would hear it. And that's actually a more damaging one, because the customer that's upset with their steak and they don't want to say anything, you may never see them again. So that's also watch for when your customer did not get what they were promised. That goes under defects. Waiting. Now, these last three are all kind of the same theme, waiting longer than necessary to serve the customer. Exerting more effort than necessary to serve the customer. Acquiring, holding, or using more material than necessary to serve the customer. Okay, all subjective judgments, but in reality, that's what it is, right? There's no hard and fast rule that says you've overproduced. Okay, there's risk, there's all sorts of safety stock. So using those as the general definition of the waste types, and then like waiting, is the customer upset with delays? It's something that, and especially in service, in service, your frontline employees are going to be in positions where they have to be able to recognize waste and make adjustments right away, right? That's the definition of service, is where the customer is integral to the process. It's not like manufacturing, where you can do everything off in a factory and the customer's not there with you messing around. But in a service, the customer is part of the process. So watch is the customer upset. Do you see customers waiting in line? That's waiting, right? Employees waiting to proceed while others finish. So this, of course, is the idea of the internal customer, not just the external. So it works. It works in all situations in that respect. Effort, people walking back and forth. Okay, it's like, seems like too many process steps are required. I mean, a lot of it comes down to an intuition, like, this just seems like it's too much, right? And then work activities, any kind of fatigue, injury, probably got too much effort there, more than you need. Materials, overcrowded storage, materials being discarded, dust on storage boxes. Again, really simple stuff that you can teach to employees and the managers. Ideally, you teach it to the managers who then teach it to employees, but I've also done this where it's taught directly to the employees. Okay. All right, then facility, 5S. So, 5S is 5S, but I do a couple of things. I've got rules for straightening. Again, when you get to the straightening step, try to make it something they can put on their wall so that not just, the managers or the quality people know how to do it 5S. It's like, this is how you do it, guys. Nothing rocket science, but it's, how to establish location, make it accessible physically, visibility. Now, you notice I've got digital items. So what I've realized over the last 3, 4, 5 years is we really have digital workplaces now. Some more than others, but it started with good old files and folders on your desktop, and now you've got collaboration spaces, and you've got online ordering, and all that. Those are workplaces that need organizing, and there's ways to do it. We're still kind of trying to figure it out, but for example, the whole idea of having a location for everything, right? Physically, that's pretty straightforward. But digitally, what does that mean? Well, it means different types of files or apps should be either in designated master folders that are clearly marked, or in the zones. They could be in a zone on a desktop. So, and that goes on with with other ideas. So here's what I see as kind of the current world of digital spaces. I mean, some businesses operate entirely here, even though you still always have physical somewhere, unless you're totally into software agents or something. But there's always a physical somebody on a keyboard with a monitor. But Windows desktop, social media sites where you interact with customers, those need to be organized, right? You have the whole world of having efficient, access to the sites, collaboration platforms, online ordering. And then lastly, visual controls. So visual controls I kind of teach as part of the 5S. When you get to the standardize, certain types of visual controls, which involve finding things, find, retrieve, and store physical and digital items fit there. Some visual controls fit in the other techniques. But this is, for example, in a 5S, when you're standardizing, these are the common, you have physical space markings, floor, wall, table. How do you identify what's in a bin behind the door, whether it's colors, labels, samples, or again, at this stage, the idea of having standards of naming and numbering for files and folders is a big deal. People often don't realize it. I mean, we did work with a law firm. It was a huge deal because they did hundreds of cases, a year. And they didn't have a good system for naming and numbering the cases, it was all over the board. So the way, yes.
Where does Shine fit in with the 5S? I didn't see that up there. I just didn't see it listed.
It was,
Right, yeah.
yeah, I didn't, well, the Shine, I view it more as just you may be looking at, maybe what you're talking about is more like standardizing the way I view it.
No, I'm talking about Shine, meaning that everything you had is works.
Is in the right place, right?
No, nothing's just in the right place, but yeah, I was put here, but it doesn't work. Well, that's
Right.
one example.
Okay,
Okay,
right.
here's my cell phone, but it doesn't work. So even if it's the right place, that doesn't make me ready to go.
Okay, good
I'm
point.
talking about making
Okay.
sure that what you have is the right tool, not just in the right place.
Okay, great question. Where the way I handle that is under managing everyday work, where you're standardizing and waste elimination, where you'd say, hey, this tool doesn't work, it's not meeting the needs, it's not meeting the waste. So, but you could put it in the Shine tool. Yeah, I mean, I realize there's different ways to do it. Yeah, that's where I would put it in the other model. So, I mean, just to wrap up this part of it, which I think maybe leads into what's going on with managers resisting or not. I'm trying to sell this. Like, okay, managers, why should you even listen to me about this? And sort of the way I've come down on it is, look, do you want higher performance with less stress? Then this is a way to do it, okay? Because you get the higher performance from getting everybody involved and coming up with ideas, being, continuous improvement and engagement. But central to this is building that respect for people, which in reality, the operative word there is trust. So you build trust in organizations that make it, and this is where Stephen Covey's son, Stephen M.R. Covey, has done unbelievably great work in UCL. Show you a little bit of it after our discussion. But as you can build more of that trusting relationship where it's not the command and control, I'm going to supervise you, I'm going to reward, punish. It absolutely lowers stress. Absolutely lowers stress. You see it at City Furniture. I mean, City Furniture is a great example of where they've gotten the higher performance, lower stress. In 5S, this is how, for example, I summarize it. Why it's easier, less chance of harming you, whatever. Basically, it feels good to work in a clean and organized space. But that's kind of the tone of how I'm teaching. So let me open that up. And not necessarily for lean. I mean, if you want to talk, quality improvement in general, or whatever it is you do and have trouble getting managers, and whether they're top management or middle or lower, to buy into what you're doing in quality. Some of them presumably do agree and follow, but many don't, right? I mean, I've got a lot of resistance teaching this to people on the front end. So let me open it up. Why do you think some managers accept and adopt it while others resist?
We had one comment online that may be a result of ignorance on the part of the manager.
Okay. But what kind of ignorance? Like ignorance of the techniques that say it's okay, I've seen this before, right? Okay, like broad brushing, yeah, this is that stuff, right? It didn't work before. Okay.
A lot of managers I've met, this is another thing on my plate, which is so interesting because we actually take items off their plate. But it's just another thing, stress. Oh, I have to do this 5S thing now. It's already overburdened.
Yeah, I'm overburdened, right?
Yeah,
It's
you're
more for me
overburdened.
to do.
And yeah, ignorance of the techniques and tools is what. we
Ignorance of the
refer
techniques and
to,
tools,
Yeah.
okay.
And I find too that the way I describe it is, managers are sometimes they're creatures of habit. And if they grew up in an environment that was non-change oriented
Right.
and, ignorant of the techniques and the tools, then they're going to be that way too. That's kind of my perspective on that.
Change. Yeah. Why change, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's doing okay. And I think this is a key thing I've seen is there is a shift in management, in ways of managing. I don't know if you're all seeing it, but I mean, the traditional command and control, supervise, reward, punish, moving to more of a participatory or partnering even, I call it a partnering style, where you're trying to engage employees, not you. I mean, the way I've heard it talked about is the partnering view is something you do with employees versus supervising is something you do to employees. That's kind of and there's no, it's a continuum. I mean, there's no like, you're totally here, but yes.
Sort of picking up what you're saying is, I think managers are afraid because they don't know what their role is. From command and control, I told you what to do. Now I'm not sure, because I see these things for the frontline employee, but I'm the manager. What the hell am I supposed to do? And I think that's scary for them to not know what they're supposed to do, especially if it changes the way they engage the workforce.
Like, in other words, they tell the employee what to do and they don't do it. I mean,
As opposed to asking them I've never asked them.
yeah, what do you mean
Well,
ask them? Are you
before,
crazy?
You're
Yeah,
telling me to, so that's,
Yeah.
that's scary, because we don't have the encourage people to contribute and to take risks. So that freaks out a manager.
right. Is this related to the rapid change in technology? Like, is that part of what the top management says, hey, why aren't we doing AI and all da. And yet, okay, how are you translating that to the front line? Look at the what is it, the Great Resignation, right, with the pandemic. I mean, why is that happening? Maybe it's this disconnect, I mean, I think it's partly what you're talking about, the upper management disconnected from the lower, but also I really think it's traditional views of management versus more progressive views that in the past, workers put up with it. And younger workers aren't putting up with it. And the pandemic sort of opened the doors to that. It's like, yeah, all right, if you're going to lay me off, okay, I'm going to go find a new career, or I'm just leaving you. I mean, there was a really good study by a market research firm of, Glassdoor. You heard of Glassdoor, where anybody can go and post, their reviews, whether they're a current employee or not, how it's like to work there. And they looked at over 1 million posts during 6 months, right in the middle of the pandemic, of people that left their work. And then they categorized them to see which ones, they figured they'd see compensation, right? I need more money. Well, compensation was like number 8. That was baseline. And you had all sorts going all the way up to 10 times more reasons was toxic workplace. And that's what we're talking about, is where there's that mismatch of what employees, just want to be treated with respect and have some trust, feel trusted and feel they can trust their employer. And that was the number one reason. So
Part of being treated with respect, though, is also the level of engagement that employees, participates. I think, I think that the manager can show respect by asking, as Steve said earlier, asking the employees
Right.
about how to do this, or what do they suggest and what do they think.
right.
That's part of respect as well.
Absolutely. And that's how you teach the Gemba walk. It's really a tool, it's a show of respect. I mean, who was that? I got around the curve. Fujio Cho, Toyota chairman. Go see, ask why, show respect. Right? That's what he said about Gemba walks. That's what you're trying to do. Go see, ask why, show respect. And the fact that you show up at the Gemba as a manager, right away showing respect. And if you ask questions, you're showing respect. And if you listen and do something about the suggestions you hear, that shows respect. Now, I mean, brainstorming aside, if it's not such a great idea, that's okay, make it a teaching moment, but don't just drop it. You know, when somebody suggests something, that's how I teach the game. Okay, other thoughts? What can we do about this? Are we stuck? The threat,
Emergency.
the urgency, yeah,
The point is more difficult to increase the change, to keep
Right.
improving.
right,
It's like, okay. We already get it, so why,
right.
the sense of urgency changes.
You know, if you can get the lean way of thinking where there really is no difference in my mind between doing the work and improving the work in lean. As you are doing, you're always trying to improve. So if there's no amount of, I reached the goal, now I can kick back. You know, it's part of what you do. It's part of learning, right? And you want, and not every employee fits in this bill, by the way. I mean, in my company, we started with 6 employees, ended up with 65, and I probably hired 200 to get there. Because not everybody wants to be engaged, you know, some people are just, they've got their way of doing things, and the employee has to, fulfill their responsibility. At City Furniture, Andrew Koenig will tell you, solving problems is not optional for employees at City Furniture. It is their job. If they're not solving problems, they're not doing their job, and they will be called out on it. So, it's not like being nice or whatever. Niceness is not the issue. It's a mindset. All right, well, I've got some thoughts, but you're saying urgency, maybe create urgency of some sort.
Most of the time, any quality improvement means implies some kind of change.
So let's go ahead. So kind of what I've seen, and again, I'm trying to teach managers. And so part of what I'm trying to do is, I'm passionate about lean as a way of managing. It worked for me incredibly well in my own business. And in order to basically sell it to managers, these are what I found to be the obstacles and what I've tried to do to overcome. Okay. I think there's a lot of confusion over what lean is. And we can, I don't have probably time to get too deep into it, but to me, you've got Lean Six Sigma, which seems normally to be a Six Sigma approach with lean tools, which is perfectly fine. It's a great solution, but it's not lean management. It's not a way of, it's not what I'm talking about. So I think there's confusion. There's an overestimation of complexity and cost of lean. So, I've proven that lean can be very well applied, even if you're a sole proprietor. Okay, so you don't have to have a scale. It can scale. But if like I'll often say, have you heard of lean? I'll ask an entrepreneur, and they'll say, oh, that's that Six Sigma stuff, right? It's like, no, sometimes it's combined with Six Sigma. But, oh, don't we have to have a lot of training and black belts? No, you don't have to, So I think I've had to deal with that. Now, resistance to change, but transformational change. And I've gotten to, we often hear about a lean transformation, right? You have to go through a lean transformation. If I'm a manager, that would scare the hell out of me. I don't want to be transforming. I know what I'm doing. It's like you were saying, I know what I'm doing now. Are you going to make me transform? So the way I've tried to address that is to break it into chunks, modules, and say, okay, that's fine. You don't have to transform. Just move a little bit. Start using a Gemba walk for motivation. Start using 5S and teaching your employees. Maybe even start using, the waste elimination, teaching your employees. Short-term thinking and ROI focus, right? ROI, return on investment, like Six Sigma really is strong in trying to show the ROI in terms of financial terms. But only so much can fit into that. That really doesn't, the whole world is not finance. Ultimately it is, but a lot goes into it that you can't capture in ROI. And the idea of short-term thinking, that's a tough one, because lean really is not, you have to be honest. Lean management is not something you can do in an instant. It requires building relationships. Like if you're in an industry where there's a transitory workforce, it might not work for you because you just don't have the time and the, people come and go before you can build those relationships. But if you do, then here's what's happened. Here's all the great things that happen.
Short wins,
Is what?
short wins.
Short wins, yes, yeah, because you get short wins up front, but the thing is, if you don't understand about trust, building the relationship, what happens? You know, if you're doing great and then they stop doing it, right? It falls.
Yeah, so sometimes the example of a success, perhaps maybe in one part of the company or even in another company that might have some kind of transformative effect on the manager's mindset.
Yeah, that's it. Somehow getting through that, wait a minute, there's a different way to do it. That's pretty tough.
I'm looking about. short-
Yeah, yeah, get like the low hanging
You
fruit.
can see the results.
Yes, yes,
Quickly,
yes.
and you get an engagement from the other employees. because
Yes.
They can see the results.
They can see the results, yes. But again, I'm leery of that if they don't get the respect for people. Because you can come in and get some quick hits. But let me come back a year from now and see if they're still doing it. And common management traditions and biases. So let me talk about that because I think that's an important. You can go to this. This is what I see happen. This has been the traditional way, the supervisory model, traditional thinking. You direct people, you control them, you tell them what to do, you control them. You reward those that do well, you punish those that don't. Okay. What you want is your employees to be compliant. You want them to do what you tell them, right? That's basically it. Inherently, this is a low trust environment. Because you're basically saying, I really don't want to hear your ideas about how to do it. I know how to do it. I'll tell you how to do it. Please just follow it. That's all. So I don't trust you to come up with ideas. And depending on what happens here, I'm going to control the heck out of it and really watch every little thing or every move you make. And, so it creates a low trust environment. Some better than others. Again, this is not an either or, but it tends to be low trust. I view it as kind of the tiger manager, right? So if your manager is a tiger or views him or herself as a tiger, they want you to fear them, right? Oh, you better keep, track the tiger or you're going to get bit. The newer way is this idea of partner, which Lean, I feel, is in the center of that. I mean, Toyota started with it. You see the City Furnitures of the world where they're showing an amazing new way of managing. Instead of directing and controlling, you're guiding and coaching. Okay, it's different. It's not, you don't let everybody off the hook, but it's a different way. It's more of a teaching and mentoring approach. You do reward and sometimes you have to punish, but recognition and celebration become important aspects of it. So instead of just compliance, you really want employees to be engaged. You want them to partner in doing the work and improving the work. And for this to work, you have to have a higher level of trust. I found this trust is just an amazing way of measuring this, and I'll show you the instrument I've developed. It's been pretty successful in letting you assess either in your own organization or when you go into organizations where they are in this spectrum. This is the tool that I mentioned earlier. It's based on the work of Stephen M.R. Covey, a book called The Speed of Trust. There's been one or two more books after, but he did an amazing job of really describing how important trust is in speeding up work and how costly it is to have distrust. If you start looking at that, it is amazing the cost of distrust. I mean, how much have we spent in TSA and checking people getting on airlines since we had 9/11, right? So now we don't trust. So how much have we spent because we don't trust anymore? Now that's at a societal level. But the same thing happens inside a business. So Covey had come up with 7 levels where on one end you're like world-class trust, and down here, you're in big trouble, and everything in between. And these are, I've used this over and over. It really is a good tool. And again, you're more than welcome to use it. So what you've got 4 dimensions: the working atmosphere. Is it toxic? Is it some grumbling, whatever? Personal relationships, management style, how much micromanagement is there? And policies and procedures, how much redundancy? And you get pretty good alignment. So the idea is anybody can score. They can say, all right, on this one, I think we're about a 4. I'll put a 4 there. I think we're a 5 here. Total it up, and you basically can determine anywhere 19 to 21 is moderate, kind of the baseline, typical, not bad, but not great organization. Okay, so that puts you an average of 20, which is kind of level 5. And what Covey has shown is these performance impacts. Okay, which is, he doesn't have hard empirical data, but he definitely has, come up with these estimates. And what it shows is the range in performance from the lowest level to the highest is a factor of 7. So any given organization, if you're here and you can get to here, you're going to improve performance 7 times. Now, of course, in reality, maybe you're here, you could bring it up, and this actually gives you Covey's ranges for performance. They're not hard numbers, but it's meant to give, if you come in as a practitioner or maybe as a consultant, you can use this tool to assess kind of where they stand in that continuum of management style. And so the next one is kind of the kicker, and I really want to get your idea on this. If you've got a traditional culture, I want to put this out there. You guys tell me if you think this makes sense. Traditional culture, command and control. They're going to be a lot more accepting of a data-driven, statistical, analytical, specialist, let's study it properly system. Yeah. I mean, basically, Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma would work, in my opinion, better in that if they already have that kind of culture. If it looks like they're more on the partnering culture side or want to get there, maybe they're somewhere in between, but they want to move. There's a desire to move their culture in that direction. Then I would argue that lean management is a better fit. It's better aligned with the management because you've got, obviously it's more people driven than data driven. I mean, I sometimes say, well, who do you trust, your people or your data? I mean, really? So if all you do is collect data and you never go out and talk to an employee and ask them their opinion, well, you're just telling them, I don't trust you, I trust the data. I mean, I love data. Lean thrives on data, but it's like, how do you use it? How do you use it? So, study it properly versus just do it. Get the employees out there. So rather than the specialists, it's more managers, employees, and stuff. So the idea, what do you think? Does that make sense? Is it like maybe I've oversimplified? That's the lean philosophy. It's all about incremental. You teach the employee to recognize the waste and do something about it. Sometimes they can do it on their own, or they go to the manager and say, hey, I got an idea. Or in a Gemba walk, they hear about it, right?
I think that it may be, those higher performing organizations, based on that other chart you showed us, that are more towards
More
the
the trust side,
partnering,
yeah,
more the
trust.
trust side, can have the data-based
Yeah.
organization,
Yeah.
and they fall back, or not fall back into it, they use that within that partnering relationship kind of a thing.
Right.
Whereas maybe the companies that don't have that trust relationship, the trust level, all they have is the data. And so they have to fall back
They
on
have to
that
fall
and
back.
use that, and it just kind of reinforces that
Yes.
very directive type of approach.
Yes. I think I completely agree. So City Furniture, who is, I mean, they've got to be the #1 lean organization in furniture in retail. I haven't seen anybody better. And I pretty much lived through it for the last 13 years with Andrew as he brought the ideas back in Japan. For the first 7, 8, 9 years, I'd ask him, aren't you guys doing Six Sigma? No, I don't want to do it. He built the lean culture. He has they call it the City Furniture Operating System. And it's the whole, the lean house and all that stuff. And everybody's got a different way of doing it. But he said, no, why would I do that? The last 5 years, he's gotten into it because he built that culture, So once you have the culture, absolutely bring it in, but don't let it be the dominant, And you can bring it into the beginning too. I think he just didn't maybe understand it, but if you bring it in, don't make it, balance it. Balance it with respect for people. That's what I would say. Balance it with respect.
I think you might be missing another column to the left of this actually, where, they don't even focus on data. There's a different kind of
Oh,
tradition.
yeah.
There's no measurements or anything
You're
like
talking about the
that.
guys, the people in this room here. Yeah, right. No, I know. Right, exactly. No, this is more like, what can you do to improve adoption? And be aware of what kind of management culture you're working in or consulting to. And you can tailor what you propose to them based on what you're seeing. You have to train them.
So I need to.
You have to train them.
Tell it properly. and
Yes.
say, okay, this is the way we are gonna do. We
Yeah.
are gonna standardize the work, this, that.
Okay, so what I will, this is what, I'm actually doing a 4-webinar series now for small business, but the same stuff applies. I also apply it to frontline management. This is all public domain. I mean, anybody that's interested, if you want to send me an email, I'm happy to send you the links. These 2 are already completed. These are coming up. They're 1.5 hour sessions where you learn the basics of what I've talked about here, and you have field trials. So in other words, a manager and or employees can learn this in the webinar, and then there's a 3-week break right now. They just learned about organizing a workplace to clear clutter. Now they've got 3 weeks. If they want to, they can do the field trial and actually try it out. But my point is, so this is my second year of doing this. I did it last year and I put it on my website. I call it a lean playbook. So it's meant to be public domain, basic training, open to you guys. If you want to use it, any of it, fine. It can be, to me, it builds that kind of baseline lean thinking knowledge, lean knowledge. And you can add on to whatever you want, so it really gives you that. And I'll be doing an update of the playbook. Once I finish this, I'll be updating the playbook this year, and it'll be all on my website. And so I encourage you to do it. Any way I can help, I'm happy to do it. Like I said, I'll do it for the money. I do it because I so believe in it, as it helped me incredibly in my own business. And I feel like building trust is just a really important thing, even in society. So if we can build trust in the workplace, it's ultimately good. So I think my email's in there and whatever else you need. That's it. I don't know, any other.
So there's one comment online I'd just like to read from, Tom? Yeah, how do you work for a lean manufacturer and lean management-based organizations? It's all about building a culture effectively, regardless of what you use. The right message needs to be delivered consistently with the right intention to current and new incoming employees.
Yes, consistent, because it's long-term. It's not a quick fix. Relationships. But I mean, I can tell you, I did it in my business and it worked incredibly well. You're right.
Well, David,
Okay.
thank you on behalf
Oh,
of.
no, thanks. Thank you so much.
We appreciate you coming in and adding to our knowledge.
Great. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you.